been a week. Um, Given the state of things in British Columbia right now, as I sat down last week to process and to think about today and writing a message, it just seemed kind of trivial, seemed a bit silly to me, especially with my kids home all week. But nevertheless, I have something for you today. And it's been my prayer and my hope that it encourages you in this time and that the Holy Spirit just speaks directly to your heart this morning. So we are continuing on in our series in the Psalms, and I could think of no other book of the Scriptures more fitting than the Psalms for the times that we find ourselves in. So we're going to be doing Psalm 46, and I have desired to work through this particular psalm with you since the beginning of this series. And before the floods, I knew that I was going to do it this Sunday. And this psalm for me as an individual, as a child of God, has a lot of personal meaning, a lot of symbolic meaning. But as I sat down to read through it and pray over it, I saw just how timely this psalm is for us and the literal meaning that we're going to find in it today. And I'm just going to read the first few verses to you, and you're going to see what I am talking about. Okay, so we're starting in Psalm 46, verse 1 to 3. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though the waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. You kind of see some of the language of flood and disaster in the beginning of this psalm, right? We've got highways that have been, the earth has given way, highways have collapsed, and people have lost their homes, their lives, their livelihood. There's just chaos, there's panic, there's fear, there's anxiety just swirling around our province. Now, what I love about Psalm 46 is it acknowledges trouble. It acknowledges hardship, the realities of this world, of this age. But then what it does is it guides us into a greater reality. It centers us on a greater truth, and it centers us on this trust in God, which we've already been hearing about this morning from our community. So I'm going to read the rest of the psalm. We're going to pray, and then we're going to work through it. Verse 4 picks up. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at the break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shield with fire. He says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." Lord, I pray that your Spirit would guide me this morning, that you would guide our hearts into truth, that you would speak to us and build us up this morning in your love. Amen. So now you may have noticed that when I'm up here talking, and even just in normal conversation with you, that I'm a hand talker. I use my hands, I use big gestures, I do it all the time. Often people have been caught in the crossfires as I'm talking to someone and flailing my hands around. So, when I started speaking, I've loved this hands-free thing. Because then my hands can just kind of do what they want to do, and I don't have to worry about gripping onto a mic, right? I love this hands-free technology. So I was thinking about this week, and I like to kind of find out the meaning of things. And so I looked in the Wikipedia, the definition of hands-free technology, and here's what the Wikipedia says. Hands-free technology, it's equipment that can be used without the use of hands, or for which the controls are positioned so that the hands are able to occupy themselves with other tasks without needing to hunt far afield for the controls. Our hands can just be free, right? Now, we love this ability, and I'm sure most of us here have utilized this hands-free technology, right? Our abilities to just take our hands off the controls. And as I was thinking about this, I thought, yeah, we love our technology, the things it has afforded us, but often this concept of hands-free does not translate into the rest of our lives. Particularly, it does not translate into our faith. That we as humans, we have this sort of deep urge, this deep need for control. To have our hands on the controls, to have our hands tightly gripped to the controls of our lives, to the controls of people's lives around us. And the thought of losing control is terrifying. It leaves us feeling exposed and vulnerable. Now, sometimes this need for control is so sort of wired into us that we don't even realize how much we sort of grasp for control in our lives. And what I'm learning, what I've seen in my own life, is that this need for control actually stems from fear. The root of needing control comes from fear. We have a lot of fear surrounding the lives of our children, the lives of our spouses, what's going to happen to our marriages, a lot of fear around the political climate, government control, fear around climate change and what is happening on planet Earth, just a lot of fear swirling around. And so this fear, we see it manifest itself in trying to control things. And we see it sort of play out in different areas of our lives. And if you're anything like me, maybe you can relate to some of these things. We try and control through prayer. If I pray hard enough, if I pray long enough, if I believe hard enough, if I say the right things, if I get enough detail and articulate it just perfectly, then God will do what I want him to do, and I will get the results I want. Controlling. I saw this one pop up this week for me. Sometimes we try and control by gathering information. The more information I have, the more in control I'll be. The more I know, the more control I'll have, right? So my parents were stuck this last week because of the floods. They were moving on Monday. Everything packed up, ready to go, ready to hit the road, and then the roads washed out, so they're stuck in Penticton all week. And I'm like, okay, Megan to the rescue. If I can find out enough information, like if I can gather exactly what's happening on the roads, how much more rain is coming, when they're going to solve this problem, what they're doing to correct it, and if I can just make all these sort of predictions, then I can help and I can save the day and I can be in control of what's going to happen to my parents. Or maybe we'd play out different scenarios in our head, right? Like worst case scenario, best case scenario, every scenario in between, play them from start to finish so I can make all the proper predictions about what could and could not happen so that I can be in control, come what may, right? We try and control our kids, our spouses, if I can make the right decisions for them, if I can guide them in the right way, if I know where they are at all times. If I tell them what to do, I'll have control over their lives, and I won't need to be scared about what's going to happen to them. If I fight for my rights and my freedoms, if I try and gain back control of what's happening in politics and in the government, if I can just get my hands all over those buttons and make things happen, then I'll be back in control of my life. If I go to the grocery store and get enough food in my cart and get home, then I'm in control and I get to decide how much I eat, when I eat. Now, not all of these things are inherently bad, not all of them. Some of them are. But when our motive is to gain control, when our motive is to sort of have our hands on the button so we can control the outcome and the results, that will lead us astray. It will lead us away from trust, away from the heart of God. If I'm in control, I can eliminate fear. If I'm in control, then I will have some peace. When things are ordered my way, when I get the outcomes I want, then I can trust God. Control is the opposite of trust. Control and trust do not coexist. They cannot coexist together when it comes to our relationship with God. So control grips, right? Control grips tightly, our hands are tied, but trust lets go. Control is in it for our own sake, for our own safety, to build our own kingdoms or build our own sort of towers of safety around us so that we don't have to be scared. But trust lets go and lets God be in control. Trust is this hands-free, hands-off act so that, like the Wikipedia said, we can occupy our hands, not needing to hunt far afield for the controls, so that we can seek the kingdom first, so that we can seek Jesus and his ways. So last week, Sam shared with us, and he mentioned that the Psalms have this intentional order to them. If we read the Psalms in order, often we will see them build off of each other. And in many of our Bibles, we'll see that they have sectioned the book of the Psalms into 5 different books. Many scholars believe that this is, that they're shadowing sort of the books of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses and Israel's journey through the wilderness with God. So section 1 is Psalm 1 to 41. Section 2 is Psalm 42 to 72, where we find Psalm 46 and so on. But there is this progression that we see in book 2 as it leads up to Psalm 46. So in Psalm 42, 43, and 44, these are psalms of lament, distress, disorientation, where everything just seems off balance. I'll just read a few of the verses for you. Psalm 42, the psalmist is crying out, "When can I go and meet with God? My tears have been my food day and night. People are saying to me, 'Where is your God?'" It's crying out, "God, where are you?" Psalm 44, the psalmist says, "You've made us a reproach to our neighbors, a scorn and derision of those around us. You've made us a byword among the nations. People shake their heads at us. They're living in shame." And then Psalm 45 is Israel's expression of this desire for a king and their delight in the king. And this leads us into Psalm 46. And what Psalm 46 does is it takes those expressions of lament, of grief, of desire, and it kind of sets our hearts on truth and trust and brings us into a new orientation. So this psalm we see at the beginning of 46, it acknowledges the inevitable earthly events and chaos and destruction. The earth gives way, the mountains fall, the waters roar, the mountains quake. Verse 6, the nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. So it doesn't deny reality. It doesn't even rebuke the expressions of doubt and fear. But then it centers us on truth, on trust. This hands-free mode of living life with God, hands off the controls. So we're going to work through the verses together. We'll start in verse 1. It kind of sets our minds upon truth. Right off the hop, it says, "God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear." This is an invitation to come to God, our refuge and our strength. This is an invitation to run away from the controls, to run away from our man-made sort of towers of safety and run to God, our only refuge, who is our strength, who is ever present, to run away from having our hands occupied by trying to control things and running to God and trusting him. Now, as I read this psalm, we don't see the word because, but I hear in my mind this word because as we work through the verses. So it says, "Therefore we will not fear." And verse 4 says, because there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. We will not fear because there is a river, because there is a life source. Nothing like the river that was experienced last week. It's not destruction, it's life. Ever-flowing life that runs through us, that is offered to us. And Jesus fulfills the words of this psalm when he says in John 7, "Whoever believes in me, as Scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow from within them." By this he meant the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were later to receive. Whoever believes, these rivers of life flowing through them, our life source, the life of Jesus given to us in exchange for ours. He gives us his life, we give him ours. Our life is no longer our own, no longer ours to control. He says, "Come to me. My burden is light, my yoke is easy. I want to give you life. Take your hands off the controls." Verse 5, I hear another because. It says, "God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at the break of day." So this psalm, we can read it as individuals and have some beautiful moments with God as individuals, but it's important to know that this psalm and a lot of the psalms actually are corporate. So this is a corporate psalm that Israel is sort of singing to God as a community, and it is sort of the corporate her. Israel in the Old Testament, their vocation, what God had purposed for them, is to be the representatives of God and his kingdom here on earth. And now the church, made up of every tribe, tongue, and nation, has the same vocation, to be representatives of God and his glorious kingdom. So here I see a promise that God gives to the church. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at the break of day. This is a promise from the Lord. But a lot of what we're seeing right now is fear that the church will crumble, that something is going to happen to the church. We're going to lose our influence. We're going to lose our sort of feet in the world. And if we don't fight for our rights and our freedoms, the church will fall. If we don't push our agendas, what will happen to the church? We won't be able to meet anymore. And we got to fight for this thing. We got to save the church. God says, no, the church will not fall, and it may not and probably will not look the way most of us want it to. God's true purposes for the church, but God promises that she will not fall. And his purposes will stand, that the church be the manifest presence of Jesus and his kingdom here on earth. And the church is his. It does not belong to us. It is not ours to control. It is not ours to save. And so we just give it to God and we trust him. God, you say the church will not fall, and so we will follow you. We will go where you lead us, and we will seek first the kingdom. Verse 6, on the heels of verse 5, says, "Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice and the earth melts." The Passion Translation says, "When nations are in uproar with their tottering kingdoms, God simply raises his voice and the earth begins to disintegrate before him." By his word, by his voice, God speaks, and human power, human control, human dominion disintegrates. It is rendered powerless. So why would we put our trust in some man-made structures, on the kingdoms of this world? And we hear another because. Verse 7 says, because here he comes. This is the Passion Translation. Here he comes, the commander, the mighty Lord of angel armies is on our side. The God of Jacob fights for us. The NIV says, the Lord Almighty is with us. God of Jacob is our fortress. We don't trust in these man-made structures because our King and our Creator is high above it all, fighting for us, with us, ever present. This is our reality as God's children. Come what may in this world, our reality is that the Lord Almighty is with us. And he invites us to come and trust in him, in his strength. Verse 8 to 9 says, he makes wars. Oh, back up to verse 8. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. The Passion Translation says that he makes conflicts end throughout the earth, breaking and burning every weapon of war. Often in the scriptures, when we see these weapons of war, shields and spears and arrows and all those things, they often symbolize human strength, human striving, human pride, human control and power. Now, these are all illusions of control. They're all illusions of strength. God invites us to trust in him. Psalm 44, in the midst of lament, the psalmist says, I put no trust in my bow. My sword does not bring me victory, but you give us victory. In God we make our boast all day long, and we will praise your name forever. We don't boast in our strength. We don't boast in what our hands can do. We trust in God, and we cease from sort of striving and having our hands busy on the controls, right? And then verse 10, which I feel personally is the essence of this psalm. It's a very well-known verse. God says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Now, what I read here is a command. Be still. Be still and know that I am God. Isaiah 2:22 says, stop trusting in mere humans who have but a breath in their nostrils. Why hold them in esteem? Be still and know that I am God. I am exalted high above it all. Trust in me. Now, I love what the beauty that we're seeing in all of the destruction. People made in the image of God, just helping out everywhere and any way that they can. And we see that they are sort of rebuilding and reconstructing things and building these sort of barriers to keep us safe from the flood. But our trust is not in those man-made structures. As wonderful as they are, it's not like, okay, good. The barriers are back up. The pump is working. Now I can be at peace. Now I can have this sense of safety. Our trust lies in God and him alone. Be still and know. The Passion Translation says, surrender your anxiety. Be still and realize I am God. Eugene Peterson in the Message says, take a long, loving look at me, your high God, above politics, above everything. God, high above it all, highly exalted King and Creator. And yet, he says, I am your ever-present help. I am with you. I am within you. Through the storms, in the pain. Sometimes we doubt that, though, right? And we hear the psalmist doubting that as well. In Psalm 44, the psalmist says, awake, Lord, why do you sleep? Rouse yourself. Do not reject us forever. Why do you hide your face and forget our misery and oppression? Like, where are you? And then Psalm 46 answers, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. God is within her. God will help her. Be still and know. Hands off and trust. This past week, as things were happening and the flooding was happening, I was reminded of the very literal storm that Jesus was in. This familiar story, Jesus in this storm with his disciples in Mark 4. So the disciples are following Jesus. They're going around bringing the kingdom. And then Jesus says, let us go to the other side. Let us cross the lake. I want to get over there. And so Jesus, gathers his disciples. They all get in the boat and they venture out onto the lake. And not long after that, things sort of start to happen. It says in verse 37, a furious squall came up and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. So their boat is being flooded. They're about to go under. And it says in verse 38, Jesus was in the stern sleeping on a cushion. Jesus has the audacity to sleep through this, and his disciples wake him and say, teacher, don't you care? Don't you care if we drown? We find ourselves saying that often in some of our storms. Lord, where are you? Are you sleeping? Do you not see? A few days back, I guess on Tuesday or something like that, Jeff came home for lunch. And he's in construction, and he kind of thinks of that kind of mind sometimes. So he just casually said, well, it's a good test of your foundation. Ding, ding, I hear the Spirit speak, right? It's a good test of our foundation. It's a good indicator of where our trust lies when the storms come, when we go through hardship and trouble. And often we cry out, God, don't you care? And actually, the Psalms give us permission to do that. God's not going to rebuke you. But in response, I know for myself, when I am panicking and fearful, I often hear the Lord say, be still. Be still and stop trying to control this thing. Stop trying to gather information. Just be still. Come to me. I am your refuge. I have rest and peace for your anxious heart. So the disciples are like, don't you care? Don't you care? And what is Jesus' response? He doesn't get angry with them. It says in verse 39, he got up. He rebuked the wind and the waves and said, quiet, be still. The wind and the waves died down and it was completely calm. This is a command, quiet and be still. His voice calms the storm. His voice gives us comfort. His voice stills our anxious hearts. And then Jesus says to them, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Why do you fear? Do you not trust me? After all this time, can't you see that I am with you, that I am ever present? Why question if I care or not? This stillness that we're talking about this morning is not a matter of complacency or inaction. It's not like we take our hands off and sit on them and watch Netflix all day. Sometimes I do that, but not all the time. It's a matter of trust. It's like when the storms come, what do you do with your hands? Where do you put them? Do you cling to the Lord? Do you run to Him, or do you run to the controls? Do you try and figure things out, try and solve all the problems? Try and be the hero, the rescuer? This being still is this non-anxious soul, a non-anxious presence. I heard someone say the other day, when our souls have this sort of stillness to them, it has a ripple effect. It has a ripple effect, and it goes out, and it's able to sort of still those around us as well. This idea of being hands-free is we're not in control of the outcomes. And we don't panic, and we don't try and seek power and influence. We relinquish our life to the one who is our life, with our hands free, so that we can bring the kingdom, so that we can show others love and compassion, so that we can experience peace, so that we can seek the Lord in all of this. This is a new orientation that this psalm brings us into, a new way of being that is nothing like this world. This world is in search of control. This world wants control. Jesus says, be still, be quiet, and know. And like the disciples, we will get to stand back in awe and say, who is this? Who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him. I want to end with Psalm 100, verse 3. We hear some more familiar language. It says, know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us. We are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Know God. Know him as your creator, as your great shepherd. Whatever comes our way, more storms will come. In this age, there's trouble. So let the world do what it's going to do while it waits for Jesus to come and restore all things. Nations will be in uproar, kingdoms will fall, the storms will rage, but we will be still and know. I want to do something.